Good evening.
Friends of the Organic Center, please welcome Chef Matthew Raiford.
Good evening. How's everyone doing this evening? Awesome, awesome. Well, please don't stop eating. Think of this as family, breaking bread, all having the same organic thought, and just know that I'm humbled to be standing in front of all 600 of you today. One of the things that Alice just mentioned was that all races, nationalities, and backgrounds have one thing in common, is that we all need nourishment. Here's a time for us to sit at a table with others and not only nourish our physical, but also our mental. So while we're sitting at the table, let's start ensuring that we're having conversation about how to train our dragon. So how many of you like movies like that? That's me right here, right? Okay. So I'm using the how to train your dragon thing is, how do we take the organic movement and make it what we want it to be? We have to train it. Kind of like me taking 1,000 pounds of vegetables and turning it into what you have right in front of you. It takes a little bit of time. It takes some creativity. It takes a lot of phone calls, back and forth. It takes a lot of, nah, it's gluten-free. It takes a lot of, nah, it needs to be vegan. It takes a lot of, nah, we need to also have some meat with some butter and some olive oil. It's a lot of conversation is what it is. And so that's how you train your dragon. You train your dragon by having conversation with your dragon. And right now our dragon in the room is organics and how to grow it. How to make sure that there's not only just another generation. So to give you an idea, for those of you that maybe couldn't hear everything, I am a 6th generation farmer and a 2nd generation chef. Now, when you look at that from a grander scheme of things, somehow this green thumb stuck in my finger since 1874, which Jupiter Gilliard bought 476 acres of land for $9 in taxes back then, which is unheard of right now. Especially for those of you that farm and pay taxes, y'all definitely understand what I'm saying. But how do we figure out a way to continue it for the next generation? How do we grow those children to understand that food is the next best thing? And that's the one thing that keeps us all going, because I remember when I was just a child, I used to hear about the 3 things that everybody needs. Anybody want to say one of them? Well, cornbread. I did not make cornbread tonight. I apologize, but yeah, you are close. The first one is food. People always say food, clothing, and shelter. If you can get in any one of those 3 industries, you'll always have a job. But always remember that food is always the first one, no matter who you talk to, no matter what race, no matter what nationality, and actually no matter what country you're in, food always starts off. So we need food to make all the other things happen. So here we are training our dragon by knowing first to have a conversation with the dragon about the food. Okay? How do we do that? We have to have conversation, continuous conversation. And where does it start? Well, for me, I think about solving on-farm challenges. So for me, I'm in the South. What would be a challenge? Anybody here from the South? Yeah. How many of you here from the deep South, though? Because, you know, people talk about Arkansas being the South, and I'm from South Georgia, where the sand is what our soil consists of. And we have a problem called root knot nematodes. And I use that as an on-farm challenge because oftentimes people don't think about how to change what happens in your environment by using the things that have always been there. So I'm going to go back just a little bit, I digress, is the word organic. So my grandmother passed here recently. She was 96. And I remember going back to the farm and having a conversation with her about I'm coming back to farm the land organically. And I started talking to her about what that meant. That was the craziest laugh I'd ever heard. She said, "First, baby, what did you say that was?" I said, well, I'm talking about actually going out there and sparking the chitin in the soil so that we don't have to worry about root knot nematodes. And she goes, oh, you talking about putting the oyster shells around the muscadine grapes, right? No, I'm talking about sparking the chitin in the soil to get rid of root knot nematodes. And she was like, oh, so you mean putting oysters on? So now we're talking about her training her dragon, because now her grandson is her dragon now, right? So she starts having this conversation with me about we are really going back to practices that have always been what actually kept us alive for so long. So my great-grandmother was 103 when she passed. So we're going back to what we have always known we needed to do, okay? So nothing gets old but clothes, and either they come back in style. I'm sure many of you, especially ladies, have heard that before. So what we're doing now, going back to this strong movement of taking care of ourselves on a daily basis, understanding what affects our bodies, is something that has to do with training our dragon, understanding what's happening with ourselves first, having a conversation with those that are next to us, having a conversation some more, having some conversations some more. So for me, solving the problem of root knot nematode came with this wonderful word called free, which meant that I started getting fish scraps, crab, and you name it, because I live on the coast, and started making compost with it. And that compost helped my silty, sandy loam become great on-farm challenges, solving them. But that all came from me having a conversation with other people that had to do with conversations with many of like-minded people like you in this room. So we have to have conversation. Now let's talk about health. My mother's 72. My great-grandmother passed at 96. My grandmother passed at 96, and my great-grandmother passed at 102, 103. I don't even know if there were birth certificates back then, but what I'm getting at is that they all lived a life full of not only just work, but eating really good food. They all have grown their food most of their lives. They all have, I didn't even realize that people went to a grocery store and bought everything there until I was probably like in my 20s. Because when I grew up, people went to the grocery store to buy dry goods, sundries, rice, sugar, stuff you just can't grow yourself. And so that's another thing. How do we train our dragon? How do we have the conversation inside our own communities about what makes our community healthy, right? And it's going to look a little bit differently for all of you. For instance, I live where we get a lot of vitamin D, a lot of it, lots of sun. So right now, back home, it's 82 this week for me. Some of you that are from up north can't even fathom that in the month of March. So we have to understand that where we live has a lot to do with how we eat, what's available for us, and what we're asking to eat, right? Like, are we asking for tomatoes? How many of you saw tomatoes in what you ate tonight in your salad? Ah, right, because there are no tomatoes that are really growing anywhere, right? Let's think about it like that, right? So that's kind of how we think about it. There are flowers that are growing, right? You notice there were some flowers inside that salad, right? Because there are flowers that are blossoming right now, okay? There's microgreens that we can grab really quick. So we have to start thinking about training our dragon by eating foods that are available, that are delicious right where we are, depending on where we are, okay? That's how we stay healthy. Last but not least, iPad Pros, who knew? Environmental benefits. So for me, I kept thinking about what have I done to create any kind of impact in the environment? Now, I'm just one person, right? One. There's 600 of you in the room. So imagine if all of us came like-minded on one thing. So where I live, there's a lot of mosquitoes. Some of you don't know about those, but I'll talk to you about them really quickly. There's mosquitoes, there's gnats, and then there's something called no-see-ums. Oh, a lot of you know about no-see-ums. Okay, great. So those are the peskiest things ever, especially when you're out there just trying to plant some Sea Island red peas. Like, they're just flying all over. You're just like this all the time, right? Well, at the time when I first moved back home, we had the mosquito truck that comes through the neighborhood. just kills everything. There ain't one thing that flies afterwards. So what we decided to do was we had this conversation about the environment and how could we stop that from happening just in our little small area. So I went to my neighbors and I said, hey, I have a farm here. I'm organically certified, and I want to find out if you all are okay with me saying that the mosquito truck can come up to the top of the road but not to the bottom of the road. That took a little convincing because the no-see-ums are like the devil incarnate, minuscule. After I had that conversation, within 1 year, we had hummingbirds, dragonflies, and over 42 species of birds that no one had remembered since their grandparents back in our community. Now notice I'm one person. So let's train the dragon because there's 600 of us in here. So we need to all go back to our communities and have those conversations, right? And the more we have the conversations, the more things start to happen. And the more those things start to happen, the more we can move from 600, because we could turn this into a Prel commercial, right? And so on and so on and so on, right? So when you have a bad meal, anybody heard of the story about the bad meal? You tell how many people? Anybody know the basic number? When you have a bad meal, you tell 10. At least. You tell 10 people that you ate at the nastiest restaurant ever, okay? When you have a great meal, you keep that ish to yourself. You like, oh, hey, girlfriend, let me tell you what I just had. Nope, I don't even like you like that, right? That's the way it works, okay? We have to change that thought process within the organic movement. We have to scream it from the rooftops so that all of us, the 600 dragons that are in the room, can change. Make those things happen. Tell everybody, every chance you get. It needs to become more and more a part of our DNA of what we do every day. Because the more we do it, the more it becomes part of us, the more it becomes part of the people that we're around, the more the food that you're eating tonight becomes every day on your plate. I hope you all enjoy. Have a great evening, and I hope to see you all again.